Hey everybody, welcome to what should be an interesting little episode here. We're going to talk about speakers that have come in that I did not design anything for. Sometimes the feedback that I give the customer is you need to start over, and that's the case with some of these. We're going to look at also the Wharfedales compared to a very expensive Paradigm speaker, and we're going to make some comparisons and let you guys kind of see what you're getting for your money versus other options that there may be out there. Let's just dig right into it. Let's get the evaluation that I give the customer that sends these in, so you guys kind of know where this goes when you send in a speaker to me. I measure and test it. I don't charge you for the measuring and testing. If it's something big and heavy, I may charge you a handling fee to box and rebox and all that kind of stuff. But as far as overall measurements, I give you the feedback. And here it is on this stuff. This is the Wharfedale Diamond. Wharfedale Diamond, and it's the, it's the 225 model. It's a little bookshelf speaker. It's actually pretty well made. It's well braced. The front baffle is done in a real pretty piano finish, and it looks nice. The woofer has a little decorative plastic frame around it. It does feel like maybe a paper cone driver, and a pretty nice tweeter, little dome tweeter in a kind of an odd shaped wave guide. Now, first measurements I took of this thing was with these little grills. Now the grills actually fit into the little screws that hold them on, so it's kind of odd to put that back on. You're going to have to feed those into the holes of those things and get them lined up like so. And on the tweeter, the problem is when you put this thing on, it creates a little bit of a cylinder around the tweeter, so it causes a significant amount of diffraction and really messes up the response. I can get this even lined back up here and put back on. There we go. So what happened when I measured this thing? Well, here's a measurement of this thing with the grill on. Yep, up top, that's a pretty big peak. And that peak is directly caused by that grill right there. Here's the same measurement, same speaker, with the grills off. Pretty smooth response. Actually, a really balanced response. If you own these things, one big tweak right off the bat, take these things off. These things are ruining the response. Looking at the crossover response, because it's got two sets of binding posts on the back of it here. It's got the little jumpers on here, so you can buy wire or buy amp. That's a whole nother topic we're going to get into pretty soon. Crossover response looks pretty nice. Both drivers have a really smooth response with the grills off. Now if we take a look at the horizontal off axis, it rolls off horizontally very well. Look at the vertical off axis. Vertical off axis looks pretty good. It only barely starts to drop at the crossover region a little bit as you start really getting high in the vertical range. So measurements wise, it's looking pretty good so far. And spectral decay on this thing is really clean. So they did a really good job there. Now impedance does drop to 4.1 ohms. So keep in mind, anything you plug this into needs to be something that can handle a 4 ohm load, because it's definitely 4 ohm. The port goes right down the middle of the cabinet from about here all the way down, and there's a slot that goes all the way around this where there's like a base underneath the speaker, and the port fires straight down into it. So I don't know, something they felt like was ingenuitive or something there. I don't know. It makes it to where you're getting the same port output regardless of where the speaker is placed, whether it's near a wall, away from a wall, or something like that. But it's not real effective. If you look at the impedance curve, the port is not doing a lot. Unfortunately, what it is doing is it's taking up the whole center of the cabinet. There's bracing here, and the whole crossover is mounted on the back wall behind the tweeter. So for one, it's almost impossible to get to the network, and there's no room in this thing to place anything else if you did build a real network out of real parts. And it would definitely need another network to bring it to the next level. As well as they engineered it, as much as you're getting for the money, the crossover parts in this thing are about like what you see here. It's the cheapest parts they can put in there. So you're here at the performance level. You've got good accuracy, good tonal balance, you've got nice engineering, but the parts quality is really holding this thing back. And again, they have to use parts at that quality. The whole speaker retails for $299 for the pair. So for the pair, not bad. I mean, they could have spent a little more money, used all polycaps and air core inductors like what we see in this crossover, and it would have bumped the price up to maybe the $279, $299 range, but you'd have got a whole lot better sounding speaker. Unfortunately, there's just nothing you can do with it at this point. So my suggestion is spend your money elsewhere. If you have that, great, enjoy it for what it is, but when you want to go up to the next level, step up to some of our kits or a different speaker, because there's not really taking that any further than it is. If we look now at the speaker here over on my right, we kind of run into the same situations here. Look at the on-axis response. It's a pretty big hump up there in the tweeter's upper range there. Looks like from about 6,000 to 10,000. There's a big lump there, and it's caused from this grill, and it's putting a cylinder around the inside of the edge of the tweeter, so it's causing this effect at that one frequency range. It's a horrible grill design. I don't know what they were thinking there. I mean, I guess it looks cool, but to listen to this speaker, you need to take it off. And taking it off, you'll see that it's a pretty smooth response. Again, they did their homework there as far as designing a network for this three-way that smooths things out. And this is the Wharfedale Diamond 240. And this whole speaker, it's only $599 for the pair. So $599 for the pair. Pretty nice cabinet. The whole side's up in this upper section, really well braced. Down lower, I don't know if you can hear that, but it's much more hollow down low, where the braces are pretty sparsely separated versus this area here where the mid has its own little air chamber that it's in. But nicely done, and a piano black finish on the front looks really good. So yeah, on-axis frequency response looks good, and if you swap the binding post, there's two sets of binding posts on the back. One's hooked up to the tweeter mid, which is very typical. The other's hooked up to the woofers, and I shot them individually. You can see the crossover point is kind of right there in the mid range, which is not a great place for them to cross, but they do some very well. They're balanced there. And if you look at the same frequency response individually with the grills off, you'll see, yeah, nice roll off of each driver into the other driver. They did a pretty good job there. And if you look at the horizontal off axis, you see really smooth off axis response. It drops off evenly horizontally in both directions. And if you go up vertically, look at the vertical off axis, you'll see very little of a dip in the response. So as you're moving up or down, it's maintaining a good phase relationship with the drivers. Nice tonal balance. Everything's looking good so far. Spectral decay looks really clean. I mean, they did a nice job. The drivers are not holding stored energy. So that's pretty clean, but then there's the impedance. Oh my goodness, guys, what are you thinking? If you look at the impedance curve, you'll see from about 100 hertz to 1,000 hertz, it averages 2.6 ohms through that whole range. 2.6 ohms. I mean, they may rate this as a 4-ohm speaker. It's not. This speaker is going to cause a lot of problems for any receiver that you hook it up to, a lot of even amplifiers. They're just simply not going to like that low impedance load. And I looked at this thing pretty hard, and I thought, you know, there's a little bit of tweaking that could be done, but overall, you could almost replicate the crossover with good parts, because the parts quality on it is what you'd expect at a speaker that's $599 a pair. It's super cheesy. You know, it's really the budget level of all parts. Again, they could have spent a little money, stepped it up, and brought the performance up quite a bit. No, it is where it is, and the impedance is so low, there's nothing I can do with this. There's no fixing that. So if you don't own it, I can't recommend it just based on the fact that the impedance is that low. If you do own it, if your amp isn't overheating and choking on it, enjoy for what it is. If you want to go to the next level, there are a lot better options out there. There's no fixing that issue. So that was, again, another one where I said, we're not doing anything with this. Now, then there's this thing. Then there's this Paradigm, which is the Signature 6, I think, and it's $6,400 a pair. I know, $6,400 a pair. This is supposed to be their top model. And let's dig into this thing and see what you're getting for that kind of price. First of all, if you look at it, it kind of has the same look as some of the other models that they've offered. I've had Studio 60s in here before. It had the same configuration, but minus the lower woofer. And it had a metal cone driver with a face plug. This is actually a polycone, and this is not a phase plug. This is just a plastic dust cap that looks like a phase plug. It's on this polycone woofer, and the woofer is in its own little plastic tub that fits right behind it in a tight airspace. And then the woofers actually look pretty nice. These woofers may have some pretty good response down low. The tweeter is another one of their little metal dome tweeters. It may be a beryllium tweeter because we see it has a grill completely covering it, but it still has the same look as most of their other speakers, other than a beautiful black piano finish, which looks really nice. Frequency response, as I measured it with the grills off, it measures pretty well. Check this out. It's pretty smooth. They did some nice work there. What was weird, though, is it's got two sets of binding posts. Normally, the upper binding post is going to be your tweeter mid, and the lower binding post is going to be your woofers. They separated it to where the mid and the woofers are on one binding post, and the tweeter's on its own binding post, which didn't make any sense. I mean, the tweeter, it's something you can add to a mid-bass driver without it affecting the amplifier or anything about it. Even if you were bi-amping the thing, what you want to do is, when you're bi-amping, is you want to drop the low frequencies off onto a different amp, so that it's not having any effect on the amplifier that's driving your tweeter mids, or from your mid-bass up. It doesn't make any sense to separate the tweeter from the mid-range, because whatever amp is driving the mid-range, you could add the tweeter to it without any effect at all. So that doesn't make any sense that they wired it that way. I thought that was kind of strange. I had to take it apart and disconnect some of the drivers to get individual mid and to get individual woofers. You can see the response there, and it's not bad. It's not bad at all, but there is an issue with this tweeter, and I knew going into it because I've measured some of their other speakers in the past. They have a sharp edge right here where this drops off, and that's always bad. That's causing some diffraction. The sound's going to reflect off of these edges, and it's going to cause some brightness. And you see it in the response of the tweeter. You see waviness in the response. It's caused from that diffraction. So I took some chunks of felt, and I just put a little piece of felt on each side of it and just taped it on and shot it again. Same frequency response. Look at the tweeter's response now. Look how smooth the lower end of the tweeter is and how much smoother the response is just from putting that felt on there. So that made a big difference. Next, I thought, well, the grill is designed to kind of fit into that area. Maybe the grill is flushing that out. So I put the grill on there to take a measurement, and the grill messed up the response even more. Now we've got a dipped area there in that range and a couple of big peaks up on the top of the tweeter's range. So the grill did not fix it. The grill made it worse. So it is what it is. Now, if we look at this response 10 degrees off axis, it actually smooths out a little bit because some of that diffraction off of both of those sides are not coming straight off of the speaker at you. When you move it off at an angle a little bit, the diffraction is a little different, reflecting on one side versus the other, and it smooths the response out a little bit. So 10 degrees off axis, it's a little bit better. And if you look horizontally at the whole horizontal off axis, going from 0 all the way to 40 degrees off axis, it looks pretty good. Measures really well that way. You look at the vertical off axis, you can see a little bit of a dipped area there at the crossover point between the tweeter and the mid as you start going up, but it's not bad. It's not real bad. Also, if you look at the impedance curve, you'll see that's very reasonable, and it drops to 4.1 ohms, so keep in mind it's a 4 ohm speaker. Lastly, let's look at the spectral decay on this thing. The first one is, I'm going to show you here, is just the spectral decay of it just like you see it, no grill and no felt around the tweeter, and it looks good. It's pretty clean, drops off, very reasonable. That's a really nice clean response. Next, you'll see it with the grill on. It's still nice and clean, but as you can see, there's a couple of humped up areas at the top, and there's that dipped area at the lower tweeter range. It is what it is. Now let's look at it with just a couple pieces of felt put on each side. Now you're looking at something that's much cleaner and much smoother all the way across. That's a really impressive spectral decay. That looks nice. So measurements wise, it's not bad. If I were to dig into this thing, I probably wouldn't really look to redesign it. I'd figure out some way to put some nice decorative felt here to where I could leave it there, and you could just replicate the factory crossover and you'd be fine. But do you need to replicate the factory crossover? What has it got in it? What's the insides? What do the insides really look like? So, in other words, are the guts of this thing high enough performance to bring this thing up to the level of the price point that they're selling it for? Well, I took the back cup off, and that's where the crossover is only for the tweeter. What I found was not this. We did not find super cheese. We found this exact level of quality here. We found Benick polycaps, just your inexpensive $2 a piece polycaps. We found a very small gauge like this one here, maybe a little lighter gauge than this, very small gauge air core inductor, and 2 resistors that were not sandcast resistors. It looked like maybe a couple little ohmite resistors. So we're looking at decent quality. We're looking at the same quality of parts that we saw in the XLS Classic that was $199 a pair. We're looking at that same level of parts on the tweeter on this thing. So you're thinking, not bad. Kind of the same as what we saw in ACTs, Dyne Audios. The Revels were kind of at that range. So I'm thinking, not bad. But the crossover for the tweeter is the only crossover on the binding post cup. To see the rest of the crossover, I have to take these woofers out, and the crossover's mounted on the brace right behind them. What was going on there? The mid and the woofer crossover? Oh, it looked like this. It was cheesy. It was super cheese. The mid circuit had electrolytic caps in it. It had little iron core inductors in it. Same for the woofer circuit. You're looking just all iron core inductors, electrolytic caps. I mean, and again, you could get away with a large laminated I-core on the woofers only because they're crossing at about 250. So, hey, not a problem there. You don't have to have an air core inductor on the low woofers, but on the mid, come on, guys. This is $6,400 here. You expect more than just $15 worth of parts on these drivers. That's really going to hold the whole thing back. That doesn't make any sense at all. Also, the wiring that was on this looked like it was all aluminum coated copper. You had push-on connectors on everything. Come on, guys, $6,400. You got to step things up a little bit. You're offering me the same quality here that we saw in the little Wharfedale, at least on the mid and the lower woofers. Granted, it was a little better on the tweeter, but there was no high-end, high quality anything there. It was just your next step up, budget level, good quality parts. So the customer decided he wasn't going to have me spend a lot of time and effort to try and replicate the crossover, go in and rebuild the whole thing point to point. It just didn't make any sense. He decided to build some XLS Encores, he's going in a different direction. He just didn't want to spend more money on top of the money's already spent on these things. It just didn't make any sense. If you don't own them, I can't say that I recommend them. If same with the Wharfedale, if you don't own these, I can't recommend these because the impedance is too low. If you've got an amplifier that's stable down to a 2 ohm load or less, then you probably have a high enough quality amplifier. You're not looking at $600 speakers. So this is one of them situations where I wouldn't recommend any of this stuff. Could I make something out of this? Yes. By the time you're done, you'd have, $7,000, $7,200 probably in parts in this thing, and you're still limited to a little polycone woofer and whatever tweeter this is in a pod that needs felt put on it because it's got diffraction issues. So it's one of those deals where just start over. If you already own it, you want to go to the next level, there are options for under $1,000 that'll take you past this in performance. Granted, they're pretty. If you like the look, the cabinet looks nice. The little feet on the bottom are kind of cool. I noticed all the weight's on the two pieces or the two legs at the front, not on the back, which is kind of odd. And the ones on the back really didn't meet the whole cabinet all the way. It kind of stuck out. The quality control was not that great. I'll show you a picture of that. Yeah, sometimes things come in, I measure it and test it, and I tell the customer, no, just start over. Sometimes stuff comes in, it's engineered and designed really well, and I say that it's engineered and designed really well, and I say, hey, let's just throw a few higher quality capacitors at this thing, get rid of the binding post, put some good wire on it. Building blocks are here for something really, really special. Just add a few tweaks and take this thing up a few notches. Or sometimes I redesign a whole crossover for something because it's a super budget speaker, and for a couple $100 more, it makes for a fun project. The end result is really great. There was a whole bunch of them out there that kind of fit in that category. You've seen the videos on that. And those are good entry-level DIY kits. I mean, you can go in and learn to do an upgrade, have some fun with it. The results then are really good. Even some of them that are fairly expensive, like the Dyne Audio that we did and some of the others, it's worth spending a little bit of money on to take it to another level. So I know you guys, sometimes you look at these upgrades and think, why not just buy a better speaker? Well, sometimes more money does not necessarily equal better performance. Sometimes it's better just to start over. And that's it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope it made you think a little bit. And I want you guys, when you're looking at some of these commercial speakers out there, look at the guts. Look what's inside. Did they put any money into what the quality of the parts are on the inside? That'll answer a lot of questions for you. Even if you can't see the measurements or things like that, look on the inside. If you don't really understand what it looks like, what the value or what the quality is by looking like it, by what you're looking at, just send me a picture of it in an email, and I'll tell you what's there and what it's worth and what it costs, or if it's great or good or poor or super cheesy. I'll let you know. If one thing's for sure, whatever I see, I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going to tell you like it is, good or bad. I'll praise it when it's good, and when it's not good, I'm going to say it's not good. So, like I said, that's it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'll see you guys in another video.